Welcome back to another episode of the MacRumors Show. I am Dan. We have Hartley here, as usual. I'm in another new spot for I don't know. Does it look that different to you?
It looks a little different.
A little different. I mean, it's no different probably to most. I apologize if there's a lot of echo. If a train comes by at any moment, you probably won't notice. Hopefully I'll have it muted by then or, work it out in editing. But yeah, new location for the studio. This is the first day in it for the podcast, so we'll see how it goes. Real quick, before we jump into our main topic this week, there's some more news after last week's episode, which if you haven't heard it, please go back and take a listen. But last week's episode, we kind of talked a lot about iPadOS 19 becoming more macOS-like, and in a couple of days after that, we started to get a few new interesting stories that I just wanted to briefly touch on. So the first one, kind of going with that iPadOS 19 becoming more macOS-like, apparently there's a new rumor out there that if you dock your iPad Pro to the Magic Keyboard, it will then show us a little macOS-like menu bar. So, Hartley, how do you feel about that?
Well, what I would like to note to you, Dan, about this particular rumor is that this is exactly what I said to you last week that I thought would happen.
Yes. It's almost are you the person who...
Maybe I am. Maybe you found me out there.
Yeah.
But I think it's an extremely good idea. I think it's such a simple idea as well. Because the iPad knows when the smart connector is engaged, and it's only used for keyboard accessories nowadays. So I think it's a perfect idea, and I think it would meaningfully change the experience of using Stage Manager at least, because you would have those extra utilities available on the top left. And I don't know, I don't really think about how often I use the menu bar on the Mac, but I guess I do use it pretty often.
Yeah.
And I would far rather use something like that on the iPad than go hunting around in loads of submenus that are different across different apps. You know what to expect with the menu bar because it is the same across different applications.
So what I want to know is what are the options that we think we're going to get here? Is it going to be the same file, edit, view? Is it? I'm guessing it's obviously going to be dependent on what app you're using.
Should be.
Yeah, and that just seems so weird to me on an iPad, even though it's stuff that we've had on a Mac for years. And also, my other question is, do you think this would allow for menu bar apps then to be something that could be implemented in the future?
You mean the little widgets that you can pin to the top right-hand side?
Yeah, absolutely. There's tons. There's a whole community for menu bar apps.
I don't know how official they are. I mean, there isn't an app store for menu bar apps, but apps can add a menu bar function. So it wouldn't surprise me if in the long term, eventually there was that kind of utility that apps could add something up there. But I imagine when we first get this, it'll be pretty simple.
It'll probably just be Control Center, to be honest with you. It'll probably have those, the specific Control Center toggles, and then maybe you can just add Control Center toggles there.
Control Center is a very good point.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have Control Center on the Mac. You have that icon up there. And it definitely makes a lot more sense the way that it works on the Mac than on the iPad, when even, as we have said many times, on a 13-inch iPad Pro, when you access Control Center, it still takes up the entire screen.
Yeah, so this would be great. This would be a step in the right direction. And honestly, it should also be a change that happens even when you're not in this mode where you have the menu bar. If I go to Control Center, please just make it a little box in that upper right corner that's not blurring everything, and you can still see other stuff that's happening while you're making those changes. But yeah, I mean, that's a pretty exciting change, mostly just because it kind of gets us one step closer to becoming more macOS-like, which rumored with, or coupled with the rumors that we talked about last week, is pretty cool. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch on is, we talked about something like this last week, but was this the rumor already, or was this just something we just talked about and then it happened again? Just I think this was my turn. I mentioned something about this. Maybe we both did, but I feel like I was definitely pounding my fists on the table for something like this. So another rumor came out is that apparently Apple seems to be testing a way to connect or at least there's a rumor that this feature could happen. So if you plug in your iPhone with a USB-C port, so any iPhone 15 or newer, you plug it into, let's just say, your studio display or anything with the USB-C cable, and it'll then basically just turn into like the external display support / stage manager that you get with the iPad. Pretty limited, but like you'd still be able to probably pair a keyboard and mouse, and then could essentially work on some of these apps if you wanted to. Right now, you plug it in, I think it just mirrors your iPhone. Which probably most people didn't know or try, because why would they? But if you do plug your phone into a studio display, you will be able to see your Mac. Your iPhone. It just acts as a mirror. But yeah, I mean, this is cool. I would love something like this.
I'm skeptical that this will actually end up happening.
Same here.
Because the apps on the iPhone are not iPad apps. But to run in Stage Manager, they would have to be iPad apps.
Yes.
So the rumor did say that it's not specifically the same thing as Stage Manager, and that there would be differences between Stage Manager on the iPad and whatever this version is for the iPhone. So whether that's just that instead of iPhone mirroring, it offers you some kind of different UI where you can tile up some iPhone apps and they just appear as these rectangles on the screen, and it's a bit different to Stage Manager because the windows are not resizable. That's still better than nothing. And in a pinch, that would still be useful. But I don't think it's going to be quite the same thing.
Yeah, like think of it like iPhone mirroring on the Mac. Maybe you just get a bunch of different versions of that you can kind of layer around with that. You can layer it throughout your display. I don't know. That'd be kind of cool. I personally would love it to be more full than that. Like make it more like Dex, where you do get windows that you can resize, and it kind of gives you more of that pro style function. But
I think eventually that will happen. By the time we get to the foldable iPhone and foldable iPad, and we start to see some more convergence between the two product lines, because you have big display sizes on the iPhone that we've just simply never had anything like that before. The iPad will be encroaching on the iPad mini very quickly, and even the Pro iPads will be folding to the sizes of the smaller ones. So there's going to be this very blurred line between the iPhone and the iPad. At that point, it would be hard to keep that separation between Stage Manager on the iPad, but not on the iPhone, or if it's in a different form on the iPhone. I think that has to head in one direction ultimately, which would be a really good thing. I mean, I would like to imagine that maybe 5 years from now, I could plug in my foldable iPhone to my studio display and use that as a very solid experience if I don't have my Mac to hand.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I was envisioning. I wonder how many people just wouldn't buy a laptop, though, if that ends up being a pretty seamless experience.
But I think you'll end up paying laptop prices for that particular foldable iPhone, so I don't know if Apple's going to be too worried about that.
Sure, yeah, that's true. I mean, they'll figure out a way, and they'll probably make it just good enough to be okay for some scenarios and bad enough to where you're like, damn it, I still need a Mac. Like, I still need to go and get one. And I feel like that's how it's going to be with the foldable iPhone. Like, you're still going to want to get an iPad potentially for certain things. But yeah, those are some of the latest rumors. Super excited for WWDC. We're getting there now. It's May 1st as of recording. So we're like a little over 1 month away, basically, a month and a week by the time you're listening to this from the keynote. So pretty excited. Finally get a lot of news and things to cover. It is just oof. Anyways, let's jump into our main topic, which is kind of a lot about the Apple Watch lineup for 2025. Since we've gone over the iPhone lineup, it only makes sense to talk about what would then also be revealed at that, presumed September event. So let's start with the new Series 11. Hartley, what features are going to make people want to upgrade? Is this going to be finally a year where we look at, the Series 10 got some decent changes, I guess, but to me, I'm still like, I don't know if people should even bother upgrading if you're only like a few generations behind.
I don't think this is going to be that.
Oops.
I think that this is going to be another year of fairly small upgrades for the Apple Watch. Ultimately, the whole device, whether you like to admit it or not, was totally redesigned last year. They're completely new casings and display sizes. So that is not going to change this year. What we are looking at is a new health feature, which would be hypertension detection. Even this is a little bit uncertain because it sounds like Apple's run into some problems with it. But I would like to believe that they will just have to put this in there, because what else will this device offer
Nothing.
if it does not have hypertension detection? It will get a new chip, as always, but I'm guessing that this is not going to differ massively from the S10 chip. Historically, Apple Watch chips, usually in terms of their actual technology, last about 3 years. And this is the third year of the current Apple Watch chip technology. The S10 is the same technology as the S9, just scaled down. And so I imagine that the S11 will be near the same as that. That isn't actually a guarantee. Just because Apple has done that with the Apple Watch for the previous 10 years does not mean that they will continue to do that this year. And it may well be that if there are these powered by Apple Intelligence features, even if they are not explicitly Apple Intelligence on the Apple Watch, there may be a better cause to actually bolster the Apple Watch's chip. And if there's not really too many other features for the Series 11, if Apple can market it as this is a more powerful Apple Watch with Apple Intelligence adjacent features, then it's another marketing point for a device that does not seem like it will have a huge amount to offer that's new. One other little feature is 5G redcap. And redcap is short for reduced capacity. It just means that it's the kind of 5G that is appropriate for devices that actually don't use a lot of cellular. But other than that, yeah, that's it.
How many people out there? I mean, I don't know. I don't use cellular on my watch anymore. So maybe this could be something that people who use cellular on their watch a lot would be like, yes, I finally want 5G capabilities and stronger, better connection. But
I don't know if that's a selling point. I just think
that's
it's
what I'm
probably
saying.
I think it's just a case that ultimately these technologies have to be upgraded. It's a bit like how
Yeah,
every
you gotta-
device had to get 4G eventually. So this is just the same thing. I don't think Apple is going to expect anyone to run out and get this for 5G connectivity. Although I imagine there are people out there that do love cellular on the Apple Watch and like to disconnect from their phone for a while. And if that means that you get a faster experience, then great. But I imagine that's going to be like 5% of all Apple Watch users, if that.
Oh, I would say smaller. Like what I mean by that was like, I'm sure people use cellular a lot, but it's not like your phone where you're constantly using it all day. It is like, oh, I need, maybe on a hike or something, you're listening to music or you need better. Well, I mean, it relies on your GPS. So like, I don't know. I don't know what you would need. I don't use it all too often, but I can't imagine it's as much as what you would need with something like your phone. Maybe it's just having more reliability and consistency is probably the thing that people ultimately would want. But like faster speeds or anything, I can't imagine people are like gonna need that per se. So obviously we're not scoffing at the idea of improving the tech. Please, by all means, do that. But I'm just kind of overlooking at if they don't add hypertension, there's this AI powered health coaching feature. Do you think how expansive is that going to be from launch, or is it going to be something small and then could eventually get into bigger and better things?
It's hard to say. The rumors on this are a little bit muddled because we were initially expecting this to be an Apple Intelligence feature. Then we were kind of expecting it to be an iOS feature that would come later in the iOS 19 cycle, presumably to older devices as a result. And then there have been these rumors about it being directly related to the new Apple Watch lineup this year. So I guess that's kind of up in the air. Maybe it's the case that it will come to all devices. There will be more AI features in the health app, but then these new Apple Watches will have specific integrations to be able to feed data in a more comprehensive way back to the health app. I think the important thing to remember with the Apple Watch as a whole is that as much as we like to complain every year in the tech community that the iPhone upgrades annually are very small, they're actually not that small. And if you were to go from like an iPhone 14 to 15 or a 15 to 16, there is probably just enough in that for someone in the tech community to justify that upgrade. So for me, moving from an iPhone 15 Pro last year to a 16 Pro, I got a bigger display, I got the better ultra-wide camera, I got camera control, and I got a bigger battery. That actually is a decent upgrade every year. The Apple Watch is not like that.
No.
The Apple Watch's upgrades are so small every year that, respectfully to those who do this, you'd be pretty crazy to do that every year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I mean, the Apple Watch Ultra 2 hasn't even been touched for a few years now.
Yeah,
because,
it's been 2 years.
Yeah, so, and I couldn't tell you if I was like itching to upgrade. You know, I think this is like the one product on that I use quite a bit that I'm just not in a rush to upgrade at all.
I have a Series 8, and I have not really had any massive appetite to buy the Series 9 or Series 10. I was more inclined with the Series 10 because I really liked Space Black. But in terms of the actual features on the device, I mean, what am I missing from my Series 8? Double tap. I'm missing sleep apnea detection. I'm missing the brighter display. These things are not life-changing features. And that's okay, actually, with the Apple Watch. I don't mind that. I'm not complaining. I actually think that releasing a new Apple Watch every year is a good thing. And it means that if you're in the market to buy one, if it's time for you to buy one, you're going to get the best one that is available at that time. It's just the same thing as with the iPhone, just the same thing as with the iPad or the Mac. Yes, the iPad Air upgrade this year was really not very significant. All they did was add the M3 chip. That was it. No new color options, no new camera features, nothing. Everything was the same as the previous model except the chip. So people look at that and say, but why did Apple bother? That's an annoying upgrade. Why are they making such a fanfare about this? But it's not for you.
No, it's the person that
is upgrading. Yeah. But it's the person who's upgrading from an iPad Air that's 5 years old and wants to buy one today. Well, good for them that they've got one with the latest chip. The same goes with the Apple Watch. The Series 11 is really not for you if you've got a Series 9 or Series 10. It's for people with a Series 8, Series 7, Series 6, and then they get the effect of all of those successive upgrades back to back.
I think at this point, if you're watching reviews every year about the iPhone, it should only be, like, we should pretty much just say most of the talk that we're having are for people who should not be upgrading rather than whether you should be upgrading. Because I feel like a lot of our perspective, like you said, comes from a year in, year out basis. So if we don't sound happy, it's not because the phone is bad or because, you know, there's not a lot new for you. It just, like you said, it really depends on where you're coming from. So we might not be happy from a tech perspective because, you know, it's something that we use every day and we change it out every year. But an iPhone 13, I know so many people that are like, oh, I've got a 13 Pro, I want to upgrade right now. And I'm like, go for it. It's going to feel magnificent compared to what you have right now. You're going to have quite a few changes because you're 3 generations behind. If you wait till the 17, it's going to be even better, especially if you go with the Air. But yeah, the Apple Watch, I feel like it's still just a slightly different story. I just think that if I hear people that say they have an Apple Watch Series 7, I think my wife still has a Series 7. They're 3 generations behind. I'm not in a real rush to upgrade her. She doesn't need or care about any of the other stuff right now. But that doesn't mean that you won't.
I think for the average person, I think that you should probably consider getting a Series 11 based on what we currently know. If you have a Series 7 or older.
Yeah.
I mean, even the Series 7 will probably be more than okay for another year. And it's just a question of how much you value these things. I definitely feel ready for an upgrade. But by then I will have waited through 3 models that I didn't buy. So
I'm ready for an Apple Watch Ultra upgrade. And that's a great transition into Apple Watch Ultra 3. What are we hoping for? Is this going to be kind of the same thing that we've just been talking about?
Well, you're going to get all the same features that the Series 11 gets. So if there are those AI features, 5G redcap, and hypertension detection, that will all be there.
Great. But hit me with those ultra-specific features.
Well, this isn't actually an ultra-specific feature in the sense that the standard model doesn't have it. But the Ultra currently doesn't have it because where Apple did not release an Ultra 3 last year, the Ultra fell behind the Series 10 in just a few ways. So the Ultra doesn't have the brighter display technology and the faster refresh rates
Yeah.
of the Series 10, which means that it can't do like the always on animation with the hands
Yeah.
on
The
the watch
ticks.
face. Yeah. And also, Apple redesigned the back of the device with the Series 10 so that it is now a metal back, which supports faster charging, and it has all of the antenna reintegrated into that design. The Ultra doesn't have that, so that would also be a good upgrade. It means you'd get things like faster charging. Now, this doesn't mean they're Ultra specific, but it does bring the Ultra up to parity with
Sure.
the mainline Apple Watch. In terms of specific features, the only one that we know about is satellite connectivity, which I think makes sense on the Apple Watch Ultra, because if you're positioning it as this device that is for when you go out hiking and
running, and
yeah, it's for extreme environments.
Yeah. Something
That
I am
makes sense on
clearly a
that.
part of on a daily basis.
Yes, of course.
Yes. I am fully aware that I should not have an Ultra in the sense of what it's specifically designed for and who it's designed for. But the battery life is very hard to pass up. Plus, I really like the black model. Not that you couldn't get that on the other ones, but I don't know. I like the way it looks. I mean, we're expecting, is it going to get the S11, or do you think it's going to fall behind there? It can't possibly fall behind. It's going to be an S10 or an 11, right? They're both going to share the same thing.
I would assume so, but of course it isn't a given. The thing that will be interesting to see is that currently the Apple Watch Ultra has a different chip to the Series 11, so the Series 10. So the Series 10 has the S10 and the Ultra 2 has the S9. These chips are physically different sizes. So the Ultra 3 will have to be redesigned internally to some extent if it is going to feature an S10 chip. And also the S10 actually will be, or the S11 will presumably be the same size as the S10 or smaller because of that redesigned casing. Mm-hmm. So there's got to be some internal redesign going on there. The other alternative is that the Ultra could just feature a different chip. And this was a rumor about a month ago that the Ultra would actually have an Apple Intelligence ready chip, and the mainline Apple Watch wouldn't. That seemed very strange, and people really shot that down. But this is the only reason that I could come up with as to why that's the case, is the physical sizes of the chip, and that the standard Apple Watch needs that smaller chip, but that isn't necessary with the Ultra 3, and they're not redesigning that casing as far as we know. So maybe it can have its own chip, but I doubt it, to be honest.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I guess the last thing on the list is the series, or the SE3, which I think that's the watch for the average person, to be honest with you. I just bought one for my mother-in-law. She wanted something. She wanted to get a Fitbit, and I had to talk her out of that. Not that there's nothing wrong with Fitbits, but I'm just like, it's on sale, and at this price for what you get, you're an iPhone user, like just get the stuff that we can monitor, like her health and all of that stuff. And she just wanted it to track steps. So I'm like, but you can look at all the other things you could do. I basically upsold her. I think she's pleasantly surprised and very happy with it. But we're expecting a new look for that. You want to go into some more detail on that, or do you think it's...
We don't know precisely what that will entail, but presumably it will involve new colors at the very least, and
that'd be cool.
Changes to the casing. So we've heard many rumors about how Apple is exploring a plastic casing for the Series 10. But for the Series 10, for the SE3.
SE3, yes.
For the SE3. And we don't know whether it's actually going to make it or not, because apparently the whole idea behind the plastic casing was that it would bring the price down, because Apple wants to compete more with lower-cost Samsung watches, and this was one way of doing that. But then apparently Apple designed this plastic casing and realized that it was basically no cheaper.
How? How is that possible? Is it because of all this stuff going on in the world, or if it's just like, are they using ultra premium?
Because nice premium plastic is still pretty expensive, and Apple is very good at making aluminium cases. So apparently there was not a sufficient price difference. And also there were these sort of slightly ambiguous rumors about the design team not being happy with how the plastic casing looked. Now, we've heard rumors about this for probably over a year at this point about the plastic casing. So I expect we will see it on balance, but it isn't a given. Personally, I think it would be a really good way to differentiate between the Series 11 and the Apple Watch SE, because if you go into an Apple store right now, it isn't really that obvious, the difference between the Apple Watch
No.
SE and the mainline Apple Watch, because they both feel the same in the hand. And yes, one's
Mhm.
got a slightly smaller display, but you really can't tell. The average person probably isn't too bothered about that.
No, I don't think my mother-in-law and my wife's watch looked any different, and she couldn't tell a difference, really. They were not that far off from each other, except for the color, and that was the only thing. But um, I, I really like the idea of a plastic casing, and I really like the idea of trying to bring it down to like sub $200, whether it be 199, 175, 150. Don't think it's ever going to get that low, but if it did, I mean, think about the new amount of people that will be like just ready to jump into a watch, specifically kids. I think like anyone, it depends. Everybody parents differently, but like 8 or older, get them a watch so that at least like, hey, when they're out playing or they're at school, they can at least send you a quick text if something's wrong or if they need to be picked up. Like we kind of, I think I've mentioned this before, but like the bus situation here has been rough. And like we just don't know where our child is half the time. Like they give us an update saying they're going to be late, but they're like an hour late. And we're like, we have no idea. We put an AirTag in there, but it doesn't update quite as much as an Apple Watch is going to. And so if they can figure out a way to get those features in there, make it cheaper, make it useful for children, I don't know. I think that would be cool. Like you're just only adding more customers. Am I wrong?
I agree. And this is apparently something that Apple has caught on to, especially amid a flood of cheaper smartwatches on the market. So I think that's what the company is shooting for, is a price of around $199, which I think is a pretty good price for an Apple Watch SE. The other change is a change of display size. And we don't quite know in what form this will be. But currently the Apple Watch SE is based on the Series 4. So you have those larger bezels. And bear in mind that the Apple Watch mainline has actually had two different changes to its display size since then. Once with the Series 7 and then again with the Series 10. So Apple has two options. Either it can slim down the bezels and give it a more squarish look, a little bit like the Series 10, at least in terms of the squarishness, not the bezels, because the bezels are thicker on the Series 10.
Mm-hmm.
But that would make it physically smaller if it reduces those bezels, which would be a good way to, again, make it feel a little bit different to the main Apple Watches. Alternatively, it could increase the display size. And that's actually what I expect it will do. I think it will mirror the design of the Series 7 and use that older technology, because that's what Apple tends to do with these low-cost models. And I imagine it will reuse those display panels from the Series 7, but just without always-on functionality. And I think that would be a very good upgrade. I think it's probably time for that display to improve a little bit, especially considering that this device will probably stick around for another 2 years in Apple stores. So let's give it that better display.
Yeah. I don't know what else you can really do to it without, then starting to look at the blurred lines of where does it fall in the lineup and then trying to increase the price. So I think those are good. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I think that there are certain features that are never going to come to the Apple Watch SE.
Sure.
I think the health features like ECG. I know you don't have blood oxygen in the US, but the rest of the world still does.
We're never going to get that anyways.
The rest of the world will also probably not get that on the Apple Watch SE. And I also expect that always-on display will stay limited to the mainline Apple Watches, which I think is actually a really good balance of features. It still is very functional. These are not essential. And if you want to pay a few $100 extra for a better experience, you can.
I agree, except for the always-on display. That is the basic functionality of a watch. You buy any normal watch, at any point, you can always see the time. For at least just always show one, like even, like the clock that shows up when your watch is like dead, but you could still see the time a little bit, or like off or whatever it is. Just at least do that. Like it doesn't need, I don't know. I just feel like that is not really something that like we should be saying, oh well, if you want always on display, you need to bump up 100, $200. Like that should be given, in my opinion. Now, any of the extra advanced health features aside from like fitness basic tracking, because I think ultimately that's what people really want it for. They want it to be able to see their notifications, track their steps, get some of the health updates, close their rings, do their workouts, but they don't need to check their heart rate. They don't need, or not their heart rate, but their, ECG and the blood oxygen if that's available for you, and, hypertension and blood glucose if that ever comes ever. Like all of that stuff should be reserved for the higher end watches. I totally get that. But come on, man, you can't give us always on display, or at least a like worse form, but at least something that shows the time. I don't know. I just think that would be a good balance, but otherwise, I don't know why anyone or how anyone could really complain. For the price that you're getting, it's still way better than most other competitive watches out there, right? I mean, I don't think
I
that's
agree.
off base.
I think the Apple Watch SE is a great device. I think it's very reasonably priced. I think it's one of the best devices Apple makes in terms of value for money.
I'll be honest with you. If I removed myself from this job that I have and I wasn't being irresponsible and buying, new tech every year, I would probably just get an SE, so I'm not spending $800 on a watch, or do the more responsible thing and buy a nice normal watch, like the regular Apple Watch, and then just not upgrade it for years. But in my opinion, cycling a new SE every couple of years whenever they come out with just makes more sense, because all I really use it for are those things that I listed. So, all right, well, let us know in the comments, of course, as usual, and we'll talk to you all in the next episode.